because today began the second week of testimony in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. Former Danity Kane member Dawn Richare was back on the stand facing defense attorneys who questioned her credibility, citing inconsistencies in her statements and her continued work with Combs after the alleged incident that she talked about. Richard sued Combs last year, accusing him of groping, assaulting, and imprisoning her, and threatening her life when she defended Ventura. She also sued for unpaid wages. What also came out on Friday on Richard's first day of testifying was that Combs's lawyers filed to have her lawsuit dismissed. Finally, on the witness stand today was Cassie Ventura's former best friend, Kerry Morgan. She described instances of being allegedly abused by Combs. Dr. Malveaux, I want to start with you. I know your feelings about this trial. I know you say, listen, we've got a lot more important things to think about than this trial. But I think that there is some importance in terms of having eyes on the justice system, especially when people of color are involved. Yeah, I know that people have been in your ear, even if you haven't been following it yourself. What is your take so far on what you think is happening?
Well, I think that Oma Congo called me on my stuff the last time we were here together because I said I don't care about it. And frankly, I still don't. What I care about is the misogynoir. I care about the fact that Black women are too often sidelined and Black men are too often excused. I would like to have 30 minutes, maybe even 10, with that man in a small room with an ugly stick. So I could just, knock him into next week. Ask him, I know your mama didn't raise you like this, boy. I know that you did, and anyway, neither here nor there. I can't deal with the particulars of this because it's layered, but I can deal with the societal impact of this because it's important. How are Black women and girls, because, some of these people are girls, they're 14. How are they introduced to the music business? Who gives them a pass? Who closes their eyes when they see a predator hitting on a little girl and having sex with her in a room with all that bottle of baby oil and stuff? Don't get me started.
Well, I think you already started. I do want to say, listen, in this particular case, so far, we are talking about adults. The question becomes, Dr. Dibinga, consenting adults. And that really is the question on the table here, whether Cassie Ventura, whether the other victims actually consented to this, or was this just as the defense attorneys and all the are painting that, listen, these were two drug addicts in a bad relationship and people have all been there. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, look, as somebody who's been in the game in terms of rapping and putting out albums and touring and things like that, I'm familiar with how cutthroat the industry is and how people have had to do incredible things to advance themselves. And I think that that's a big part of this. I think that this idea that these were just people who were just, cold drug addicts or whatever they said, who just love parties, I think it's nonsense. R. Kelly is an R&B figure, right? So Diddy is really the first person in hip hop to really suffer the consequences of the Me Too movement. Me Too movement skipped over rappers. And it really bothered me that a lot of these guys were not called to task like some of these other guys, the Weinsteins, the Bill Cosbys and all of that. This is a moment for us to really reflect. I personally, do not believe that Cassie and these guys are lying and making up stuff and just trying to get attention. I don't believe in any of that. I believe at the end of the day that Diddy has always been a violent person. I believe that this is a person who inside himself is a small person. And so has always had a need to dominate and control people. And he's not the only one in hip hop. We come out of a culture, particularly those of us who are part of that hip hop generation. If we go back and listen to the music, a lot of the stuff, a lot of it was about sex and relationships with underage people. BBD, Do Me Baby, Backstage, Underage, Adolescent, how you doing? LL Cool J, Big Ol' Butt, I Was Down at the High School, whatever. Like, we came out of this culture. And a lot of us were too young to understand what was going on. We danced to it. Now we're older. We're parents, aunties, uncles, or whatever. And now we need to be part of the group that's going to hold our community accountable. So I'm hoping that it all comes out. I hope that there's not any particular glitches or whatever that leads to some form of mistrial, because this story needs to be told. And it's chilling hearing all of the stories, but at the same time, I'm glad that these stories are coming out so we can know so much of this behind the scenes stuff about the growth of hip hop that people just don't know about.
Dr. Dibinga, I want to stay with you for one moment, especially because you have been in the industry. In court, there were many emails where Cassie Ventura looks like she did want to participate. And I know that can be explained in many different ways. People get themselves in bad relationships and often do things for their partners they don't want to do. Does it extend to this for the normal average person? Probably not. But for her, this was the threshold. And of course, there were times where she said she was abused. I'm just wondering, if you were on that jury, would that make a difference to you that there were, in fact, some texts where she said, hey, I am ready for a freak off and I love you, or she was doing drugs on her own, or she would call male escorts after they left on her own. All of that did come out from her own mouth. And I'm wondering just how you feel about, especially, again, being part of the industry.
Well, look, people have to understand. I mean, look at the age difference between, Cassie and Diddy. Look at her career trajectory as it relates to their relationship. And I hope that the people who are prosecuting Diddy are doing a good job. I haven't watched every ounce of the trial, are doing a good job of helping people understand the pressures that a lot of these young women particularly go through to be part of the industry. And so my hope is that these people on the jury will look at the scale. My hope of what he did versus what she may have done afterwards. I hope that they will have people who are trauma and abuse experts who can speak about things like Stockholm syndrome and how people may feel attached, to their captor. I'm somebody who's also worked internationally in the field of sex trafficking. And so I understand what it's like for somebody to feel like, and people say, well, she was a singer, she was famous. It doesn't matter. I know exactly, I've seen what it's like for people to feel like they have to be under the thumb of somebody, even when that person is not around. And so regardless of what she may have done here and there, there's a larger network of issues that she, as far as I can tell, was a victim to. And so I'm hoping that the jury can indeed see through that, but it's up to the prosecution to make sure that that is happening.
Representative Shannon, before I get to you, I just wanted to share with folks that, going into the courtroom and seeing Sean Combs all gray. I mean, the pictures and the sketches that you see, they are a fair representative. I say that it's actually slightly worse in person. All gray, probably lost about 20 pounds with his glasses. At times he reads the Bible. He's thanks to everybody who is in there, and he watches everything and he takes notes. The public is overnight there at 3 p.m., 6 p.m. lining up, especially during the time of Cassie. Today, it wasn't that bad. But there's just a lot of talk in the courtroom, outside of it rather, about, what could happen. And I think that a lot of this just has to do with who is telling the better story. And like Dr. Dibinga said, we need somebody to contextualize this, because why did she stay in this relationship for 11 years? Representative Shannon, what are people talking about in your circles?
Well, I think that people are really shocked that this is really such a complex case, because it is really complicated. I think a lot of people thought that this was going to be a case very similar to the R. Kelly case, where it was almost pretty clear what was happening, that he was, keeping folks, holding folks hostage for the purpose of sex, and making people do things completely against their will almost the entire time. This case has become very complex because through testimony, we do know that Cassie said that in the beginning, things were consensual. She did want to do these things because she did not want him to leave her. So that, I think the prosecutors have the job of basically figuring out, okay, since everybody admits that at some point this was consensual, when did it become coercion? You got to establish that timeline. I've been keeping up with the case, and what I'm seeing is that they're doing a great job of outlining these state charges. I'm seeing almost every day plenty of things where they're proving that he's guilty of state charges, but they haven't made the full link for those federal sex trafficking charges and all of that. And I think that it's becoming complicated because of the text messages where they are, showing where she said that she wanted to do some of these things. And so it's just become a very, very complicated case. But overall, I would say there's a lot that can be learned from this. I think about, how folks sort of push back on what they would call, being woke, and some of the newer values that have really entered our society. And one of them is really conversations about consent. Folks will push back about, not that, consent is woke. It's like, well, consent is a thing that you understanding consent and how consent actually works is the thing that can keep you out of jail. And I think that Puff Daddy, he's seeing that right now, which is that what you may cast aside as just woke garbage or BS has nothing to do with you, is actually the thing that separates you and being in jail.
Yeah. So I want to give a little insight. Today I was in court. Dawn Richard, she took the stand. She was a former member of the band Danity Kane, and was on the reality show Making the Band. I was very interested because she was a corroborating witness to say, hey, I did see Cassie be put in these dangerous situations where she was beat, she was struck, and she did make her point to some extent in terms of her being punched at a table in front of different employees and ushers, you know, who was even out to dinner, being punched right there at the dinner table. But, you know, when Cross came, they really put a lot of holes in her story, asking about specificity. Did she see Sean Combs hitting Cassie with a frying pan, as she was making eggs one morning? And so she went back and forth. And I'm afraid that on Cross, you could look at the jury, and the jury was not having it. They did not take her as a credible witness. And it was very difficult just to sit there and think, okay, wait, what was true, what wasn't true? Because she did seem to change her story. She said she answered it to all the questions to the best of her ability, but it certainly didn't come out very well. All right, anybody want to give a final comment on this Sean Combs trial? Is that going to be you, Dr. Malvo?
It can be. One of the things I think is important here, obviously, the prosecution has proven that this man is a horrible human being who hits women, who coerces people. And the question is consent. The question is, because he had all this money, so he could manipulate people. But at what point were you complicit in your own oppression? And I think that's what the jury is going to have to grapple with. I mean, did you choose to get your behind beat because you thought you were going to get a record deal? You know, I mean, as I said, I'm an elder. I look at this bit and I shake my head. But I also say that people should not be coerced. Their livelihood should not be placed on the line, which it appears to have been done here. And those like Obakongo, who know more about the music industry than me, are better qualified to talk about it. But I would just say this stinks. I don't know if it's a federal case, but certainly it's a case of some sort. And Black folks, I was with a bunch of people, multi-generational, and I had a couple of folks say, well, did she choose to do that? We have to start looking critically at the people we lift up. If nothing else, nobody ever needs to buy another Diddy, whatever again. Record, boy, just go find a small hole to sit in. Could be the jail, but it could be your mama's house.
You said mama has a lesson. Listen, this was a federal case. I want to say that. You mentioned her record deal. She had a 10 record deal. She had one record come out of that lengthy relationship, be it personal or professional. And I want to say this before I throw the break, that I do think they have made the case that he did cross someone over state lines for the purposes of prostitution. That is the lowest charge. So in terms of the jail time he would get, it's up to 10 years. But I do think that they are actually going to say, and so far have proven, prosecution and defense, all right, we'll give that up. We are kind of conceding to that. He did cross state lines for purposes of engaging sex and paying for that sex. All right, we're going to be keeping more up with more on that here on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.